This is hardly a new question, but seriously guys, why do we all love Neo so much? I've been thinking about Neo a lot lately, which has opened my eyes to the fact that there isn't a whole lot to think about. Considering how much people like her, myself included, it's very easy to forget that Neo is, by all rights, a minor character. She first showed up just kind of hanging out with Torchwick while he gave his speech, and has spent the majority of her screen time since then as a lackey, whether following him or Cinder. She hasn't made a single appearance in any of the 7 openings, unless you count her fucking hat, and she has yet to make any decisions on her own that seriously shook up the narrative, unless you count going after Cinder and eventually teaming up with her, which I don't, because all it did was turn her into a lackey again. But the most minor character thing about her is that, well, we don't know shit about who she is. We've gotten a pretty good idea of her surface-level personality, and have been able to infer some things about her relationship with Torchwick based on her behavior. I don't personally embark on revenge quests after losing a boss I didn't like, but that's about it. And yeah, that good comeuppance she dished out to Cinder was pretty awesome, but even as far as most revenge stories go, this one is pretty straightforward. There is something exciting about waiting for a character to get what they deserve, and something cathartic about watching that moment come to fruition, but most of the especially compelling revenge stories I've seen have taken that inner desire and exposed it for the self-destructive, hateful instinct that it is in reality. By comparison, Neo's revenge story, making us cheer for her to beat that bitch into the ground, seems embarrassingly simple. Of course, simple isn't always bad, but it does reinforce my point that there isn't a whole lot to her. So what is it about her that works like gangbusters? Well, first of all, if years of watching anime has taught me anything, it's not to underestimate surface level charm. There's something intensely lovable about the concept of Neo, a mute female mini-me of Torchwick who fools with glass illusions and fights like she's out for a Sunday afternoon stroll, never losing that precious little smile. Her fighting style is unique, fun to watch, and leaves a lot of room for creativity. And her design, I'd hate for this paragraph to turn into me pointing at each individual character detail and saying, good. So I'll just mention that I adore how her hair matches her alley cat eyes, and move on. Lastly, there's something just awesome about Neo's apparent level of skill. So far, most of the quote-unquote pro huntsmen have been painted as though they're on an entirely different level than the students, and for some inexplicable reason, Neo is one of only 2 characters able to punch beyond their weight without the help of outside forces, i.e. Silver Eyes. Tyrion can take on an entire team of students because he's pro-level, one of the adults, but so can Pyrrha, and so can Neo. Even among the other pro-huntsmen, she's shown to be particularly dangerous, not even slowing down against the Beacon Trilogy Big Bad herself until Cinder cheated. I mean, used her maiden powers.
You cheated. Pirate.
In short, Neo is ridiculously strong for someone who looks like she could be Ruby's age. Maybe it's just a matter of wish fulfillment, being able to enjoy that my favorite character is also surprisingly powerful, but it is one of the more fun aspects of watching her. There was something joyous about watching her stare down Team Juniper, thinking to myself, oh, they are so fucked, and then being absolutely right. But all of those were just surface level design choices, and good design does not a character make. Another thing I learned from years of watching anime. Beyond her aesthetic and conceptual appeal, what's so captivating about a character we know nothing about and who never says anything? Well, personally, I think it's just that. Not knowing anything. The mystery behind Neo has an inherent allure. You see, the element of mystery in a story can be very powerful. It engages the audience's sense of curiosity, gets their minds whirring with all the possible answers, and if you play your cards right, can be the primary thing getting them to turn the metaphorical page. This is why J.J. Abrams' films work in the broadest possible sense. They can be delightfully engaging because of those driving questions that Abrams builds his narrative around. The reason why I think a lot of his stuff doesn't work is that he's so dedicated to that damn mystery box of his that the answers to the questions he poses are rarely as interesting as the questions themselves. This is why he's the worst possible director you could have picked to end a trilogy whose major plot beats were being made up as they went along, but that's beside the point. The thing about mystery that Ruby didn't seem to pick up on until Volume 6 is that it has a very short lifespan. You can only engage the audience audience by making them ask the same question over and over so many times, especially if that question is, what the fuck is going on? However, you can renew interest in a mystery by revealing little tidbits of new information, and thus changing that central question into something entirely new. The question of who is the killer becomes a lot more interesting when new evidence changes the question into who among the 7 people in this room is the killer. Of course, the specific pieces of information that the audience is privy to are really important to creating a sense of urgency, establishing stakes, and providing context for compelling drama, so things aren't nearly as simple as I just described, but the overall gist is that you can't repeatedly beat the audience over the head with a question without providing reasons for them to continue being interested by it. So if that's the case, wouldn't the lack of new information regarding who Neo is, why she's so skilled, and where she comes from be frustrating rather than interesting? Well, no, actually, because the answers to those questions aren't relevant. The story doesn't ask them 40 times per episode, and neither are they very important to the central plot or the main characters at any given time. In the meantime, the parts of her backstory we can't easily assume don't leave us wanting for detail like Cinders used to, and still kind of does. We always know exactly what we need to know about Neo at any given time. In fact, her post-time skip return in Volume 6 is a pretty good example of that. Neo and Cinder teaming up isn't something they could get away with without further justification, so just enough context is provided. The fact that she's here for revenge immediately confirms a lot of things we could have easily assumed. A, she loved Torchwick, or is at least upset that he's gone. B, she blames Cinder's scheme for getting him killed, and C, we finally have a clear-cut motivation and goal for her, that being vengeance for a loved one. And honestly, that's all we need. In fact, I wish they would have stopped there, and have been a little disappointed to see them giving insights into her psychology through facial expressions, reactions, and, illusion language? One of the more fun Neo mysteries to contemplate following the Volume 6 team-up was whether Neo genuinely bought into Cinder's argument that Ruby is a better target, or is simply waiting for her chance, having decided that she can't brute force a full maiden into submission. After all, Cinder saying that Ruby is the one that killed Torchwick isn't what made Neo stop fighting, threatening her with maiden powers did. But there was no way to know for sure what our little video game protagonist was thinking. I feel like it would have been more fun for her to remain an enigma and eventually surprise us with her choices, rather than gradually turning into yet another follower of Cinder's whose loyalty is beginning to waver. And this brings me to my next point. I think if we ever got the full Neo treatment, a complete animated backstory explaining away every last question we've ever had about her, it would ruin the magic. After all, unless there's a whole lot of character depth and thematic intricacy waiting for us there, it won't be more interesting than what we're used to. Neo is perfect as she is, always fulfilling her little corner of the story perfectly. The allure of the mystery of trying to guess what's on the other side of that charming-ass smile disappears if we ever get the answers we're looking for. Honestly, I cannot believe I'm advocating for mystery box storytelling right now, but she and her backstory play enough of a minor role in the narrative that it works here. So I'd say to the writers, keep doing what you're doing. Don't give us any more information than the bare minimum we need to understand her actions and decisions. The rest of that backstory is more interesting untold, so just let the audience use their overactive imaginations. Don't let that illusion shatter.